Right, Ms. Berlia, if you could tell us about your existing projects.
Well, as you know, APJ has 13 schools currently, which is right up to K-12, and we have 13 higher education institutions, which are covering a gamut of degrees and diplomas and even PhD programs, as well as the Appejay Stya University. The Appejay Stya University is first of its kind in the country. It was a flagship institution which tried to bring in the best practices from the Ivy League universities in the US, while at the same time matching it and customizing it to the Indian way of looking at education from time immemorial. And when I'm talking about that, the thing was we tried to work on having the best of global education, wherein the academic and research content was focused on. Side by side, the liberal arts philosophy, which means that not necessarily liberal arts subjects as we tend to think of liberal arts. You know, you think you're talking about language, literature, history and all that, but really the way that you think and you apply what you are learning both to the subjects which you are taking a degree in and the community and around that you live in. So you learn to think critically, to analyze, to reflect and to apply, and be able to have an idea of the various domains of knowledge. Because if there's one takeaway we took from industry, and that was that they are looking for students, and you know, I wear the industry hat as well, so I can say this personally, who just don't carry the domain skills and knowledge, but are able to also bring forward behavioral and social skills, creative and imaginative skills, and an innovative approach to thinking and working, which means in a way that's also applied research. So this including and then being able to have practical training wherein you have employable skills, you have this kind of thinking, and you have the necessary knowledge which is kept updated in terms of the curriculum, because you don't have a centrally driven curriculum. You have a curriculum which the professors continue to update and upgrade, keeping in view the needs of the particular academic requirement as well as the environment and industry. We also very recently now initiated preschool, which is Appejay Rhythm's Kinderworld, because we realized something very critical. And you know, I have been talking earlier, as you recollect, the importance of looking at education with an integrated approach. So you need to really look at school, university, vocational, skill education as a holistic whole, because beyond a point you can only build upon the foundation. And what we've discovered is, and this is a scientific fact, that the first 5 years of a child's life are the most critical time of their being. And that is the time when they need the kind of approach that helps them through the different stages of development. And particularly at that level, children advance in different areas in a different way. The kind of skills that you want students to carry on with and imbibe later in life, these have been imbibed very early on. So these are some of the projects that we are looking at, but another area which is very dear to me is in terms of pedagogy. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in this form, because when you're looking at aspirations of the students and needs of industry and economy, I think in today's world we need to look at a multimodal approach to teaching and learning. And today's students also imbibe knowledge in a very different way from the way that it used to be earlier. Use of technology also can be very important in this, but beyond that, the concern really is that, you know, we've been teaching a lot of external knowledge, if you will, in terms of the knowledge of the world, the sciences, the arts, the history and so on. I think what we have somewhere missed out on, and where India had that kind of edge and the strength, is the knowledge of the self. And in a way, I was very happy to hear from the government their focus, which is going back on looking at yoga. And I'm not talking about just physical yoga, but yoga as a way of looking within yourself from different perspectives and dimensions. Because it's only if you are a human being, a good human being, and you are somebody who has understood yourself well, who is able to understand the internal workings of the mind and the questions which have been coming from time immemorial of who am I, you cannot be a happy individual. And one of the founding philosophies of the APJs, apart from looking at imparting the best of education with global dimensions, has been rooted in Indian culture and human values. We truly believe that every child has the potential to excel in some way or the other in their lives, so that they get that kind of multi-dimensional exposure. Everybody doesn't have to be a doctor or a scientist. There are so many avenues that they can explore, and that at the end of the day, no matter what you may have achieved, what really counts is human character. And I sometimes feel a great sense of pride, because a lot of times I meet APJites who have passed out from so many years. We've been in the field of education now for 45 plus years, because our foray into education has not been as an industry or for profit. It is a not for profit, although we believe in keeping it sustainable. And when you meet them in different areas of life, you can see that hallmark of having been an APJite. And that, I think, that characteristic of being a good human being.
Right.
So my idea really today is that how do you make this into a capacity building exercise? Because there are so many lives that we touch. I mean, we have about 60,000 odd students, you know, in different ways that we reach out to directly and indirectly through our support in different education. But how do you do capacity building? And therefore, our real concern today is on teacher education, on programs created and geared towards creating leadership in the field of education. And when you're looking at teacher education, I don't mean just B.Eds and M.Eds, but really capacity building within our own teachers, as well as teachers outside of our system, wherein we can make that difference.
Great. Which means Appejay is working on the lines of community service, compassion to animals. So what is the extent of this education, moral science education? Is there a particular curriculum designed?
You see, we believe that you cannot preach values. They have to be imbibed. So it starts really from the top, and that means the quality of people that we choose to be our principals and our teachers. But also what we've done is we've embedded it in the curriculum itself. So when you look at learning outcomes, you not only look at knowledge, skills and attributes, there's a fourth column, and that says what are the values that are being imbibed through this lesson planning.
Is that a passing criteria, a passing subject? Or
no, it is the this curriculum planning as an outcome based criteria is an integral part, first of all, of the teaching learning process. Okay. So when a teacher does her lesson planning, it becomes integrated into that. We don't teach it as a subject. It is imbibed through everything, starting from morning assembly to the way the curriculum is planned, right, to the way the teaching takes place in the classroom. And we believe in recognizing what is being done correctly. So rather than saying that you have failed, there's nothing like failing in values, because you continue to improve and develop as human beings. We try to catch them doing the right things and recognizing that. So something as small as that on an annual day, if you give prizes for coming first in the class or excelling in sports, you also get prizes for displaying and exhibiting exemplary human values, honesty, consideration for others, and so many other things.
That's excellent. Right. Ms. Berlia, so what's your perspective on the existing higher education scenario in India with all the challenges we have at present?
You see, as I had been speaking earlier also, today if you look at higher education, there is a need for much greater investment from the private sector. Without going into the details of the figures, I mean, one can keep on throwing statistics, right, but the fact of the bottom line is that if we really want higher education to expand in this country and achieve the gross enrollment ratio of 50% by 2030 that we are talking about, then involvement of private sector becomes given important, and without it, it can't be done. Let's put it this way. Even today, private sector contributes in a very large way. But the real challenge is that while we want private sector to participate in this, there is still a lot of lack of clarity, if you will, on part of the regulatory bodies and the environment at large, that what needs to be done to bring private sector into this. You see, if you look at it from point of view of people who are there for not-for-profit, for instance, they are also finding it challenging to be in this space, because you don't want to compromise on your values, while at the same time you are dealing with the multiplicity of agencies at state level, at central level, and you are being regulated to the point where your focus on delivering quality education is becoming diluted. If today you ask me, my director of the institution or the vice chancellor of the university is probably spending 60–70% of their time managing all of this, rather than really, getting on with what they are supposed to do, and the delivery of good education. On the other hand, if you want investment to come into this sector, then most people are going to, that real flow of funds, if you will, whether it comes from abroad or whether it comes from investors in India or through PE funding, is only going to happen if people are able to get a reasonable return on their capital. I don't think capital today is looking for some extraordinary level of profits, but they are definitely looking for return, and they are looking for an ability to exit as and when that they need to. Now, if you look at the regulatory framework today, it really doesn't allow that very well. First of all, the regulatory structure itself, whereas you can only come in as a society or a trust or a Section 25 company. People have found ways and means of getting around it, but these are fancy structuring things which are, I think, a little on the borderline. And they've tried to create arm's length entities through having a separate infrastructural company, a separate education provider company, and so forth. But fact of the matter remains that any case with the new disclosure norms, it's becoming more and more dicey. And this is not the way to attract people who would like to deliver quality education and really have a long-term stake in this industry, if you will. Because if you want to attract those kind of people, and those kind of people have invested in so many industries today in this country, which makes India proud. I mean, we made a name for ourselves across the world, then that has to be done. And by the way, this industry has a lot of scope for exports on one side, because you have the potential of becoming an education hub for your neighboring countries, and a lot of your students who are actually at the moment going abroad, some of them will continue to do so, and it's good if they do. But it's a pity if they are going abroad because they feel that they don't have access to the right kind of
we spend
quality
around
education.
7 billion every year for higher education
Absolutely.
studies.
And then, if you look at what needs to be done from the government, I think they know what needs to be done. And some of the initiatives are actually very laudable. If you look at this initiative of setting up an university in China for peace studies, the Mahatma Gandhi University that was done right now, or you look at the yoga university which is being announced. I think these are some of the things perhaps that needed to be done, or the putting up of a integrated skill development and entrepreneurship ministry. But fact of the matter remains that there are fundamental changes that need to take place, some in the shorter run and some in the longer run. There are certain administrative reforms, rules, regulations. If a small group could start studying that with proper representation from different stakeholders, I think quite a bit of the pain which we currently face itself could go away. Then if you look, I think, different arms of ministries look at education. The budget announcements, the taxation norms in this country have a lot to do with, scaring away investment into this sector, if you will. As I was saying, you cannot accumulate endowment funds. You can only have 15% surplus every year, and it's non-accumulatable. We used to at least be allowed depreciation on investment on, capital, plant, equipment and other things. That has been done away with on the norms, saying that, because there's no taxation on this sector. But industry is getting investment allowance and it is getting depreciation. And how do we therefore replace equipment, right? And then you are looking at, a situation where any investment that is made in education today by industry or by other things, whether in terms of research In public sector universities, that is an allowable expense. But it is not an allowable expense if it is done with the private university. Or if you look at access to research fundings, it's normally only distributed to public universities. Today, industry in India, I hope it changes over time, is not spending that kind of money yet on research. I mean, we have been engaging with industry in very different ways. So we have attracted some funding from industry, from research. We've taken into place industry mentors, for example, who come and work with our students and our faculty. We are encouraging our faculty to go to industry and spend time there so that there is some real-time experience. We are trying to appoint people from industry to be a part of our faculty. So all those initiatives are there. But at the same time, if you do not incentivize industry and you do not allow research fundings, let the private and public universities compete for it on equal basis. That is okay. But if you don't give them that kind of incentive, if you will, then research also doesn't get properly incentivized and encouraged, so to speak. Now, if you look at entrepreneurship and incubation, that is another area where I'm happy that the government is showing a lot of interest and has taken some initiatives. And I think this is one area where I believe that there's a clear understanding that, our people, I mean, we are talking about having a GR of 50%, but honestly, where are those students going to go? They need to be, there is not going to be generation of sufficient employment to absorb them. So the whole approach to teaching learning needs to have looked at this, and entrepreneurship and incubation cells need to have come up, and the financial and budgeting signals need to have gone so that the startup ventures and other things which universities encourage and put into place are given further fillip. So one of the areas which is a real pain, for instance, is that when you encourage these kind of startup ventures and it's done jointly by university and industry, sometimes there has to be sales of those products. So again, it becomes economic activity, and you are saying because you are an educational institution, therefore you cannot have sales, and otherwise you will be subject to tax and other things. But if it is a part of an incubation center or an entrepreneurship cell or a skill development center that you have set up, for instance, with the students, you need to give them that outlet to be able to exhibit their work, to be able to sell their work, to be able to, you will also need to at some point engage with and sell IP, if you will. And that brings to us to another problem. There is a real lack of awareness of IP. And if this needs to be given, because if you are talking about research, we are talking about innovation, we are talking about Make in India, and I think the Prime Minister has gone on record to say that when he's talking about Make in India, he's not only saying that manufacture in India. You really eventually want to be able to say create in India, and you want to be able to say create in India, wherein hopefully that a lot of innovation which is indigenous and aimed at solving the problems of our people in this part of the country are also taken into account. But if you want that to happen, then how do you encourage innovation and research? It is only going to happen when we are able to engage in this way. And incidentally, there is a lot of indigenous knowledge and indigenous skills. If you look at embroidery, you look at handicrafts, you look at painting, and so many things, skills which are part and parcel of our Indian culture, which are in the process of dying out. Now, some time back, one could have said, well, what does one do? There is no market for it. But today, if you ask me, many of these things would have a huge market, if not in India, then certainly internationally. We need to find ways and means also being able to encourage some of these areas, which again is a part of what higher education can do. And I'm looking at higher education not just in terms of colleges and universities, but really any education, let's say post K-12,
right,
let us say.
That can be under the technical and vocational education.
Absolutely. But my concern is that if we create too much of dichotomy between the different kinds of education, right, particularly vocational education and higher education, while the focus on skill development is laudable, the difficulty is that the social context is that students need social recognition. And even today, regrettably, if you haven't got your bachelor's degree, for instance, as a social recognition, merely having a vocational diploma or certificate doesn't give you the kind of social respect that you want to have. I don't think this is something you can change overnight. I don't see it happening within the next 10, 15 years that easily. And if that is the case, then I think we need to remember and recognize the fact that students, while pursuing employable skills, will also want degrees. And we have to, today of course there's a lot of distance education that is coming into fore, but the quality of that distance education needs to go beyond just of correspondence or contact classes. And the challenge is, how do we use technology to make distance education as meaningful in most cases? In some cases it's impossible if you're looking at engineering programs and so on, but make it as meaningful as if you were actually in the classroom.